It was one of those seemingly ordinary Thursday evening dinners at Mom's modest suburban home in the outskirts of Chicago. The kind where the comforting aroma of slow-cooked pot roast mingled with the faint scent of autumn leaves drifting through the slightly open kitchen window. And everyone gathered around the worn oak dining table that had witnessed countless family milestones since Dad's passing more than a decade ago, pretending for a few hours that life unfolded in harmonious rhythms. Despite the undercurrents of unresolved tensions and unspoken resentments that often simmered just beneath the surface of our interactions. I, Elena Ramirez, a 42-year-old single mother and office manager navigating the daily grind of spreadsheets, school runs for my 12-year-old daughter Mia, and the quiet ache of building a stable life after my ex-husband's abrupt departure 5 years earlier, sat there with my fork poised over a helping of mashed potatoes, listening intently as Mom lavished praise on my younger sister Sophia, detailing with animated gestures how she had just sealed another lucrative real estate deal involving a sprawling lakefront property up in Wisconsin that promised not only financial security, but also a sense of prestige that elevated our families, standing in the eyes of distant relatives and old neighbors alike. Sophia, 3 years my junior and always the one who seemed to glide through life with an effortless charisma that drew people in like moths to a porch light on a warm summer night, basked in the attention, her perfectly manicured nails gesturing emphatically as she recounted the negotiations with a high-profile buyer whose name alone evoked images of corporate boardrooms and summer yachts, while Mom's eyes sparkled with a pride that felt both familiar and painfully exclusive, as if Sophia's achievements alone could redeem the hardships our family had endured since Dad's sudden heart attack had left us all scrambling to redefine our roles in a world that suddenly felt smaller and more precarious. As the conversation flowed onward into discussions about family legacy and the intangible bonds that supposedly held us together through economic downturns, job losses, and the relentless passage of time that turned vibrant children into middle-aged adults grappling with mortgages, aging parents, and the lingering question of whether they had truly made their mark, Mom leaned back in her creaky wooden chair with that faded floral apron, still tied loosely around her waist, her silver-streaked hair catching the soft glow of the overhead light, and declared with a conviction that sliced through the room like a well-honed knife, "Sophia is the pride of this family, the one who has risen above it all with grace and determination, always putting us first in ways that inspire everyone around her to strive for something greater than mere survival." The words landed heavily amid the clinking of silverware against ceramic plates, creating a momentary hush that amplified the subtle shifts in posture around the table, Sophia offering a modest yet triumphant smile while twirling a strand of her highlighted hair, the cousins exchanging quick glances laden with their own interpretations of favoritism drawn from years of holiday gatherings and backyard barbecues where such declarations often surfaced like unwelcome guests, and me feeling that familiar constriction in my chest, a twisting knot of emotions that blended long-suppressed hurt with the resigned acceptance of being perpetually cast in the role of the reliable shadow who ensured the spotlight stayed trained on the star performer without ever stepping into the beam herself. In that instant, memories flooded back unbidden of my own contributions that had sustained us through darker times, from the double shifts I pulled at the local insurance firm to cover Mom's mounting medical bills after her hip surgery 2 years prior, to the countless weekends I spent ferrying Sophia to her extracurricular activities during our teenage years when she dreamed of becoming the next big real estate mogul, all while I quietly pursued a practical associate's degree in business administration that allowed me to support the household without fanfare or applause. Choices that now seem to render me invisible in the narrative Mom so eagerly constructed. Rather than erupting into the confrontation that might have shattered the fragile veneer of civility we all clung to in these gatherings, especially with Mia occasionally present and absorbing the dynamics like a sponge in ways that made me wary of escalating family discord into something that could scar her budding sense of security, I chose instead a path of measured restraint that masked the storm brewing within, rising slowly from my seat to collect the scattered plates, mine with its half eaten remnants of roast and vegetables Mom's cleared but for a smear of gravy, and even Sophia's barely touched serving that spoke to her perpetual preoccupation with maintaining a figure admired at open houses and networking events, carrying them methodically to the sink where the warm water would soon cascade over them in a rhythmic ritual of cleanup that had fallen to me time and again since childhood. "Thank you for the lovely dinner, Mom," I said with a voice steady and composed, infused with just enough genuine warmth to deflect any immediate suspicion of underlying turmoil, though inside the words tasted bittersweet, a polite acknowledgement of the effort she had put into the meal despite the emotional barbs that accompanied it, as if expressing gratitude could somehow neutralize the sting of being overlooked in favor of someone else's spotlight. Mom nodded absently, her attention already drifting back to Sophia with another probing question about the intricacies of her latest commission structure and the lifestyle it afforded. A lifestyle that included weekend getaways to trendy spots in Milwaukee and a wardrobe of tailored suits that contrasted sharply with my own rotation of comfortable blouses and slacks suited for long hours at a desk job that paid the bills, but rarely sparked envy. With a brief wave to the cousins who offered sympathetic half-smiles that hinted at their awareness of the imbalance, without venturing to comment, I gathered my purse and keys, stepping out into the cool evening air where the streetlights cast elongated shadows across the driveway. My old Honda Civic waiting like a faithful companion for the 20-minute drive home through the familiar grid of suburban streets lined with maple trees shedding their fiery leaves in preparation for winter's approach. The journey back unfolded in a haze of introspection, the radio softly playing an old Bruce Springsteen ballad about blue-collar perseverance and the dreams deferred by the grind of everyday American life, its lyrics resonating with the quiet determination that had defined my path from a wide-eyed high school graduate in this very neighborhood to the woman now steering through traffic while contemplating the weight of familial expectations that often favored flash over fortitude. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the modest two-story house I had purchased 5 years ago with a down payment scraped together from overtime and careful budgeting now standing as a testament to my independence amid the solitude of an empty living room since Mia was at a sleepover with her soccer teammates, the initial wave of anger had coalesced into a more resolute clarity, prompting me to kick off my sensible flats and sink onto the couch with a sigh that carried the exhaustion of not just the day but the accumulated years of such slights. Scrolling idly through my phone, I revisited snippets of old family photos stored in a digital album, images from Dad's funeral where Sophia positioned herself front and center, her tears drawing consoling arms from aunts and uncles while I lingered on the periphery, coordinating the floral arrangements and thank you notes in the background, or holiday snapshots where Mom's beaming face always angled towards Sophia's latest accomplishment, be it a college graduation cum laude or her first big sale, leaving my study promotions and volunteer hours at Mia's school PTA meetings as mere footnotes in the collective story. What a load of nonsense it all seemed in that moment, the kind of favoritism that masqueraded as encouragement but eroded the foundations of equality among siblings, especially when viewed through the lens of midlife reflections where one begins to question the narratives imposed by parents and the long-term toll they exact on personal growth and self-worth. Sleep proved elusive that night, my mind replaying the dinner's pivotal declaration in loops interspersed with fragmented dreams that blended childhood resentments with present-day realities, such as the loan I had extended to Sophia last year for her down payment on a condo that she had yet to repay despite her boasts of booming business, or the way she had casually borrowed elements of my resume for her own job applications early in her career, passing them off as original insights during interviews that Mom later celebrated as evidence of her innate talent. Morning arrived with the insistent chirp of my alarm, pulling me from a restless slumber to brew a pot of strong coffee in the kitchen where sunlight filtered through the blinds onto the counter cluttered with Mia's homework and my planner filled with reminders of upcoming parent-teacher conferences and utility payments. As I stood there savoring the first steaming mug, gazing out at the neighbors' automated sprinklers misting their impeccably groomed lawn in a display of suburban perfection that often felt more aspirational than attainable, my phone vibrated sharply on the granite surface, drawing my attention to a new message from Aunt Linda, Mom's perpetually inquisitive sister who resided just 2 blocks away and thrived on inserting herself into family matters with the zeal of a community newsletter editor. The text read with urgent punctuation, "Elena, what in the world did you do to upset your mother so profoundly, because she is upstairs in tears right now?" Barricaded in her bedroom and refusing to utter a single word to anyone attempting to coax her out, not even for her usual morning routine of tea and the crossword puzzle. Please call me immediately to explain. A surge of conflicting emotions coursed through me in that instant, a blend of involuntary guilt for perhaps contributing to her distress through my understated departure the night before and a deeper undercurrent of that cold satisfaction, derived from the realization that my silence had finally reverberated back, prompting the family to confront the discomfort of their own dynamics rather than continuing to gloss over them with platitudes about unbreakable bonds. Rather than succumbing to the impulse to dial Aunt Linda back and offer reassurances that might prematurely diffuse the situation, thereby perpetuating the cycle of appeasement that had defined my interactions with the family for so long, I allowed the message to linger unanswered on the screen while setting the phone aside to finish my coffee, the bitter warmth grounding me as I contemplated the broader implications of Mom's reaction and the potential ripple effects it could have on the intricate web of relationships that extended to cousins, in-laws, and even distant relatives who gathered annually for Thanksgiving feasts heavy with turkey, cranberry sauce, and the inevitable comparisons of whose life had progressed farthest along the path of conventional success. In a moment of calculated resolve, I opened the group chat thread with the cousins who had been present at the dinner, my fingers hovering over the keyboard before composing a message that threaded subtlety with pointed implication. Last night's gathering was memorable as always, wasn't it, with all the highlights on certain achievements, while the rest of us handled the behind-the-scenes work like clearing away the evidence of the feast. Perhaps next time we can share the illumination more evenly among everyone who contributes to making these moments possible. Hitting send elicited a quiet thrill, the words crafted to evoke discomfort without overt accusation, ensuring that Sophia would recognize the veiled reference to her elevated status and Mom might pause to reflect on the exclusivity of her praise, all while maintaining my position as the composed observer rather than the instigator of discord. As the read receipts began to accumulate one by one, each notification a small affirmation of the message's reach, I moved to rinse my mug in the sink, the running water a soothing counterpoint to the accelerating pulse in my veins, only for the phone to ring moments later with Mom's name illuminating the caller ID, her subsequent voicemail filtering through the speaker in a voice fractured by sobs. "Elena, my dear, we absolutely must talk about what happened last night, because this silence between us is tearing me apart. Please come over or call right away, so we can sort through whatever misunderstanding has led to this pain." The plea hung in the air like an unresolved chord, stirring within me a potent mix of empathy for her evident suffering and the burgeoning anticipation of what revelations might emerge if I chose to engage on my own terms rather than rushing to mend fences that had been unevenly built from the start, leaving me poised on the threshold of a confrontation that promised to unearth long-buried truths about loyalty, sacrifice, and the true cost of being the unsung pillar in a family tapestry woven with threads of favoritism and forgotten contributions. Picking up from the insistent ring of Mom's call echoing through the quiet kitchen where sunlight slanted across the countertops cluttered with the remnants of my hurried breakfast preparations and the faint steam from my cooling coffee mug still lingered in the air like an unspoken invitation to delve deeper into the unfolding family turmoil, I found myself frozen in place for a moment, staring at the phone screen as her name blinked persistently, each vibration sending a subtle jolt through my fingers that gripped the edge of the sink, while inside my mind raced with a whirlwind of conflicting impulses that ranged from the ingrained habit of smoothing over disruptions to preserve the fragile peace that had sustained our household dynamics for years to the more rebellious urge to allow this moment of discomfort to propagate through the family network, forcing everyone to confront the imbalances that had festered unchecked since our childhood days in that same suburban Chicago neighborhood where backyard fences divided properties, but never the shared resentments that seeped across them like morning dew. Part of me yearned to answer immediately, to offer the reassuring words that might coax Mom out of her self-imposed isolation and restore the surface-level harmony she so desperately clung to as a widow navigating the loneliness of an empty nest filled with faded photographs and half-finished puzzles. On the living room coffee table, yet another part, the one hardened by decades of being the dependable daughter who absorbed the blows without complaint, while Sophia reaped the rewards of attention and leniency, whispered that letting the silence stretch a little longer could serve as the first genuine step toward rebalancing the scales, especially after her pointed declaration at dinner had relegated my efforts to the periphery of family pride in a way that echoed countless similar slights from holiday gatherings where turkey and pie were shared but recognition never evenly distributed among the siblings who each bore their burdens in distinct yet equally vital ways. With a deliberate exhale that carried the weight of unresolved grievances accumulated from high school science fairs where my painstakingly crafted projects became Sophia's unearned accolades to the more recent financial strains I had shouldered alone during Mom's health crises without a word of thanks, I silenced the ringer and slipped the phone into my pocket, grabbing my keys instead for a spontaneous drive through the winding streets of the suburbs where maple trees arched overhead in golden canopies and minivans line the driveways of families much like my own, all pursuing the American dream of stability amid the undercurrents of personal sacrifices that often went unacknowledged in the rush of daily routines involving carpools, career ladders, and the quiet negotiations of single parenthood that demanded resilience without applause. By the time midday sunlight filtered through the diner's plate glass windows where I had pulled up for solace in the form of a hearty turkey club sandwich layered with crisp bacon and tangy mustard on rye bread that evoked memories of simpler lunches shared with Dad, before his heart gave out during a routine checkup that shattered our family's illusions of invincibility, the influx of text messages had escalated into a barrage that lit up my phone screen with notifications from various corners of the extended family network, each one probing deeper into the perceived crisis that my understated exit from dinner had apparently ignited like a spark in dry tinder. Aunt Linda followed up her initial message with another laced with dramatic flair typical of her role as the self-appointed keeper of family lore, detailing how Mom remained ensconced in her upstairs bedroom with the door firmly latched against all entreaties, her refusal to emerge even for the herbal tea she brewed religiously, each morning signaling a depth of emotional distress that bordered on theatrical yet carried the authenticity of someone unaccustomed to reckoning with the consequences of her words in a household where favoritism had long been the unspoken rule governing interactions. Sophia's contribution arrived next, her text threaded with a veneer of sisterly concern masked by digital emojis that I imagined she deployed to soften the underlying accusation, urging me to reach out to Mom because the situation had spiraled into what she deemed unnecessary chaos, a characterization that struck me as profoundly ironic given her history of generating far greater upheavals through impulsive decisions like the string of ill-advised real estate ventures that had previously required bailouts from family resources without reciprocal accountability or gratitude. Ignoring the mounting digital pleas that piled up like unread emails in an overflowing inbox, I focused on the comforting routine of the diner meal. The sizzle of fries in the background kitchen blending with the low hum of conversations from other patrons, truck drivers nursing coffees, and local moms gossiping about PDA fundraisers, reminding me of the broader tapestry of midlife American life, where such personal dramas played out against the backdrop of economic pressures, community obligations, and the perpetual quest for validation that often eluded those who toiled in the shadows of more visible achievements. As I lingered over the last bites of my sandwich, allowing the flavors to ground me amid the emotional turbulence, my thoughts inevitably drifted back to the foundational patterns of our family history that had shaped the resentments now bubbling to the surface. Recollections of childhood evenings in our modest ranch-style home where Mom would gather us around the kitchen table for homework sessions, her praise disproportionately directed towards Sophia's creative storytelling assignments, or artistic doodles that earned gold stars while my methodical reports on history timelines or math problems received only perfunctory nods before she turned away to attend to the next shiny distraction. A dynamic that extended into adolescence when Sophia's soccer triumphs filled the walls with trophies and newspaper clippings while my consistent academic performance and part-time job earnings at the corner drugstore went uncelebrated, funding the very cleats and league fees that propelled her toward varsity stardom without a backward glance at the sister who balanced books and babysat to make it all possible. What a peculiar brand of foolishness it seemed in retrospect, that willingness to submerge one's own light to fuel another's blaze. Especially when viewed through the lens of my current life as a single parent orchestrating Mia's after-school activities and career advancements in an office environment where promotions came through diligence rather than charisma, yet carried the same invisibility that had plagued my familial role for so long, prompting a wry internal chuckle at the absurdity of it all, as if life were a poorly scripted sitcom where the punchlines always landed on the straight man enduring the jokes without retort. Energized by this reflective humor that tempered the sting of old wounds, I finished my meal and steered the car toward downtown Chicago, the skyline emerging on the horizon like a promise of anonymity amid the bustling streets lined with high-rises and coffee shops where professionals networked over lattes. Drawn inexplicably to Sophia's real estate office in a sleek building that symbolized her ascent through glass facades and polished marble lobbies, contrasting sharply with the vinyl flooring and fluorescent lights of my workplace. Arriving unannounced, I navigated the reception area where a young assistant glanced up from her computer with polite curiosity, directing me to Sophia's corner office adorned with framed certificates of sales achievements and panoramic photos of luxury properties that screamed success to anyone perusing them during client meetings. Finding her between showings with stacks of glossy listings spread across her desk like treasures from a modern-day treasure hunt. Her initial surprise at my presence softened into an awkward embrace that felt more obligatory than affectionate, the scent of her designer perfume clashing with the faint coffee aroma from the high-end machine humming on a side table. As we settled into chairs for an impromptu conversation that she initiated by circling back to the dinner incident with feigned nonchalance, attributing Mom's distress to typical stress from managing the household alone and suggesting we all needed to cut her some slack in her advancing years. As the dialogue unfolded over cups of that rich espresso that tasted of indulgence far beyond my budget, Sophia veered into boasting about her recent triumph in closing the Wisconsin Lake House deal, painting vivid pictures of the property's private dock and sunset views that appealed to affluent buyers seeking escapes from urban hustle. Yet a subtle shift occurred when her phone buzzed insistently with what she dismissed as a routine bank inquiry, her body language tightening as she angled the screen away from my view, an inadvertent clue that pierced the facade of her unassailable prosperity and hinted at the financial undercurrents roiling beneath her polished exterior. Overheard snippets from past family events had long suggested mounting debts from speculative investments that teetered on the edge of collapse. Obligations she masked with tales of commissions and networking triumphs that kept the relatives at bay from probing too deeply. This revelation crystallized the dilemma gnawing at me in that moment, a fork in the road where one path led to extending the hand of support as the dutiful sister who had bailed her out before, potentially perpetuating the cycle of one-sided reliance, and the other tempted with the allure of allowing natural consequences to erode her pedestal, exposing the vulnerabilities that equalized us in ways Mom's favoritism had long obscured. A choice fraught with moral ambiguity that might strike observers as petty withholding yet felt like essential self-preservation after years of unreciprocated generosity. The conversation wrapped with superficial promises from Sophia to check in on Mom and diffuse the tension, her parting hug lingering a beat too long as if sensing the shift in my demeanor. But as I exited the building and merged back into the afternoon traffic snaking toward the suburbs, the weight of that glimpsed fragility lingered, intertwining with memories of Mia's recent soccer game where I had cheered from the sidelines much as I once did for Sophia, pouring energy into others' victories, while tending to my own quiet fulfillments like the small garden in my backyard that bloomed with perennials despite neglectful weeds. Evening descended with Mia's return from school, her backpack thudding to the floor amid tales of classroom adventures and homework woes that filled the house with youthful vitality. A counterpoint to the adult intrigues preoccupying my thoughts as I prepared a simple pasta dinner from pantry staples, the aroma of garlic and tomatoes wafting through the rooms like a balm against the encroaching shadows of family discord. As we ate, the group chat with the cousins reignited with speculative messages about Mom's continued seclusion and whispers of underlying causes tied to the dinner's awkward close, their words painting a picture of escalating concern that mirrored my own internal conflict, until an impulsive resolve overtook me while clearing the table, leading me to compose an anonymous email from a nondescript work account long used for discarding spam, addressed to our mutual high school friend Carla, who orbited the family periphery with her insatiable curiosity for gossip. The message, crafted with deliberate vagueness and a touch of ironic wit, read, "Word on the street is Sophia's real estate empire is as solid as those lake houses she peddles, but keep an eye out for any unexpected floods. Sometimes the foundations aren't what they seem," a clever nudge that played on her industry jargon without direct evidence, designed to circulate back through the grapevine and plant seeds of doubt regarding Sophia's vaunted perfection, the satisfaction of this understated retaliation warming me like the steam from the dishwater as I imagined the ripples it would create without implicating me outright. Tucking Mia into bed later amid stories of her day that evoked my own youthful aspirations deferred for familial duties, the house settled into nighttime hush broken only by the persistent vibration of my phone, revealing Sophia's incoming text that cut through the quiet with unfiltered accusation. "Elena, is this your doing? Because Carla just cornered me with questions about some debt rumor floating around. And if you've been spreading lies to undermine me after all I've done for this family, you're going to regret it more than you know." My heart quickened at the direct confrontation implied in her words, a surge of adrenaline mixing with uncertainty about whether this calculated prod had ignited a backlash too fierce to contain, leaving me to ponder in the dim glow of the bedside lamp as sleep evaded me once more. The impending arrival of Sophia at my doorstep the following morning promising to unravel further layers of our entangled histories and force decisions that could either mend or irrevocably fracture the bonds we had navigated for so long. Sophia's insistent pounding on my front door reverberating through the early morning stillness of my suburban home where the first rays of sunlight pierced the curtains to illuminate the kitchen floor, still bearing traces of last night's dinner crumbs and Mia's forgotten cereal bowl from her rushed breakfast before school, jolting me from the half-formed thoughts swirling in my mind as I clutched a fresh mug of coffee, whose steam curled upward like the tendrils of unresolved tension that had kept me awake long into the night after her accusatory text had landed with the precision of a targeted missile aimed at dismantling any illusion of innocence I might have clung to in the escalating family fray. Opening the door to reveal her standing there on the welcome mat with her hair disheveled in a way that belied her usual meticulous styling and mascara smudged around eyes narrowed in a mixture of fury and desperation that spoke volumes about the fragility of the empire she had so carefully curated through years of strategic networking and embellished narratives shared at family reunions. I positioned myself in the threshold with one hand on the frame to maintain a barrier against the intrusion while Mia peered curiously from the hallway behind me, her school backpack slung over one shoulder as she absorbed the charged atmosphere with the wide-eyed innocence of a child navigating adult undercurrents that threatened to disrupt the stability I had worked tirelessly to provide amid the chaos of single motherhood and career demands. "We need to hash this out right now, Elena, because whatever game you're playing with those anonymous whispers has gone too far and is dragging the whole family into a mess we don't deserve," Sophia demanded in a voice pitched low to avoid alerting the neighbors whose houses dotted the cul-de-sac with their neatly trimmed hedges and American flags fluttering in the breeze, her posture rigid as she glanced over her shoulder toward the street where her sleek SUV idled with the engine humming softly, a symbol of the outward success that masked the internal fractures now threatening to surface under the weight of rumors she clearly feared would undermine her professional credibility in an industry built on trust and appearances. reluctantly ushering her inside to the kitchen table where the wooden surface bore faint rings from countless coffee mugs and family discussions over the years. I poured her a cup from the percolator whose aroma filled the space with a comforting normalcy that contrasted sharply with the brewing confrontation. Settling into chairs that creaked under our weight as Mia slipped out the back door toward the school bus stop with a quick wave that carried an undercurrent of concern for the sisterly discord unfolding in her absence, leaving us alone to navigate the minefield of accusations that had simmered since the dinner incident and now boiled over in the harsh light of morning revelations. As Sophia launched into her tirade with gestures that swept across the table like indictments in a courtroom drama, detailing how Carla's probing questions during a casual coffee meetup had forced her to fabricate explanations about financial stability that left her sweating under the collar in a way unbecoming of the confident realtor she projected to clients touring multi-million-dollar listings, I sipped my coffee methodically to buy time and temper the rising heat of my own defensiveness, allowing her words to wash over me while inwardly a dry amusement flickered at the irony of her portraying herself as the victim when her history of sidestepping accountability stretched back to our shared adolescence in the cramped bedrooms of Mom's house where posters of pop stars adorned her walls, and my side featured practical calendars tracking study schedules and part-time job shifts. Her claims of jealousy on my part rang hollow against the backdrop of memories that flooded unbidden, chief among them the 8th grade science fair where I had devoted weeks to researching local ecosystems, meticulously assembling a model watershed from recycled materials that demonstrated erosion patterns with flowing water and embedded sensors I had jury-rigged from household wires to simulate environmental changes, only for Sophia to insert herself at the 11th hour with pleas for collaboration that morphed into her taking the presentation slot, reciting my prepared script with her charismatic flair to captivate the judges while I hovered in the audience shadows, receiving Mom's effusive congratulations afterward as if the victory belonged solely to the performer rather than the architect behind the scenes. A pattern that repeated in subtler forms throughout high school when she adapted elements of my scholarship essays for her college applications, earning admissions to programs I could only afford through community college loans paid off with interest from my entry-level office positions. What a peculiar form of folly it had been to remain silent in those moments, prioritizing family unity over personal acclaim in a household where Mom's widowed status amplified her need for visible triumphs to offset the grief that lingered like dust in unused corners. Yet as Sophia's voice rose in pitch accusing me of perpetual resentment that poisoned the well of sibling bonds, I felt the stirrings of a resolve to peel back those layers without descending into the shouting matches that had occasionally erupted between us in younger years, steering the conversation instead toward Mom's ongoing seclusion with questions about whether any progress had been made in coaxing her from the bedroom sanctuary she had fortified against the outside world. Sophia's response came haltingly, her fingers drumming on the mug in a rhythm that betrayed nervousness beneath her composed facade, admitting that Mom remained withdrawn and murmuring incoherently about ungrateful children and the burdens of favoritism that she had unwittingly imposed through years of differential treatment disguised as motivational nurturing. Details that painted a picture of emotional unraveling more profound than the initial texts had suggested and hinted at deeper regrets, surfacing in the isolation of her upstairs retreat filled with Dad's old fishing rods and photo albums chronicling family vacations to the Wisconsin dells where sibling rivalries had first taken root amid games of mini-golf and lakeside picnics. Just as the exchange teetered on the edge of reconciliation or further alienation, my phone buzzed on the table with an incoming call from our cousin Jake, the affable mechanic from the South Side who had always maintained a peripheral yet observant role in family affairs through his weekend visits and garage tinkering sessions with Dad before the heart attack claimed him, his voice crackling through the speakerphone as I accepted the patch-in with a nod to Sophia, whose expression shifted from irritation to apprehension at the interruption. "Elena, Sophia, you won't believe what turned up while I was helping Mom sort the attic clutter that's been piling up since last winter's storm knocked down some boxes from the rafters," Jake began with a tone laced with excitement tempered by caution. describing how he had unearthed a bundle of yellowed envelopes tied with twine, containing Dad's handwritten letters and legal documents pertaining to the family while drafted in the months leading up to his death, revelations that included notations about financial allocations heavily skewed towards Sophia's nascent real estate ambitions with provisions for seed money on property flips that had ultimately faltered under poor market timing and over-leveraged loans. The twist deepened as Jake elaborated on a specific amendment Mom had made post-funeral, redirecting substantial portions of the estate to Sophia under the guise of supporting her potential while minimizing my share to nominal amounts justified by assumptions of my self-sufficiency through steady employment. Yet the documents hinted at outstanding debts Sophia owed back to the estate from those early ventures, sums that had been quietly absorbed by Dad's savings without formal repayment plans, creating a tangled legacy of favoritism intertwined with fiscal irresponsibility that now casts shadows over the narrative of Sophia's unblemished success. Sophia's reaction unfolded in real time across the table, her face paling as she leaned forward to interject denials that rang with forced conviction, insisting the changes were mutual decisions born of necessity during Mom's grief-stricken haze, and dismissing the debt mentions as outdated bookkeeping errors from a time when family resources flowed freely without the strings of modern accountability. But the doubt seeded by Jake's account lingered palpably in the air between us, mingling with the coffee's fading aroma to create an atmosphere thick with the uncertainty of unearthed truths that challenged the foundations of our shared history. For my part, the information struck like a revelation long anticipated yet shocking in its specificity, igniting a dilemma that pitted loyalty to the family unit against the pursuit of justice for the sacrifices I had made in deferring dreams of travel or further education to subsidize Sophia's pursuits, choices that now appeared not merely overlooked but systematically undervalued in the will's architecture, prompting observers to question whether my emerging inclination toward exposure constituted righteous reclamation or vengeful overreach in the delicate balance of sibling relations strained by decades of imbalance. Jake promised to digitize the pertinent pages for our review, his sign-off carrying assurances of discretion that felt tenuous given the explosive potential of the contents. After which Sophia rose abruptly from the chair with a glare that promised retribution, storming out the door toward her waiting vehicle while muttering about distortions and betrayals that would not stand, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the echo of her footsteps and a mind reeling from the implications of this archival discovery on the path forward. The remainder of the day unfolded in a blur of routine obligations, from dropping Mia at her after-school art class, where she immersed herself in clay sculptures that mirrored her creative spirit unburdened by adult complicities, to my shift at the office amid stacks of invoices and conference calls that provided a temporary respite from the personal maelstrom, though concentration wavered with every notification that hinted at further developments in the family saga. By late afternoon, as golden hour light bathed the parking lot in hues that evoked autumn harvest festivals from our childhood, I found myself compelled to rummage through my own storage boxes in the garage, pulling out a weathered photo album that chronicled milestones from Dad's era, pausing on an image from his funeral service, where Sophia occupied the foreground with theatrical sobs that garnered embraces from the assembled mourners while I stood slightly apart, managing the logistics of the reception with quiet efficiency that went unnoticed amid the outpouring of sympathy directed her way. A subtle clue embedded in her whispered assurances to me that day about safeguarding our collective future now resonating with newfound suspicion regarding her motives tied to the financial intricacies Jake had unveiled. Evening brought a resurgence in the group chat activity among the cousins, their messages buzzing with speculation fueled by Jake's vague allusions to attic finds without specifics, creating a digital undercurrent of intrigue that mirrored the growing conflict within me about how to wield this knowledge without descending into outright warfare that could alienate Mia from her extended kin or exacerbate Mom's fragility. Yielding to an impulse born of that internal tug-of-war, I accessed an archived email folder on my computer containing correspondence from years prior, selecting a thread where Sophia had candidly admitted to adapting my professional writing samples for her initial job pursuits in real estate. forwarding it inadvertently to the family chain with an innocuous caption about digital housekeeping, unearthing old correspondences that illuminated past collaborations, the maneuver crafted with sufficient ambiguity to expose the pattern of appropriation without overt malice, eliciting a cascade of surprised responses from relatives who had long idealized Sophia's trajectory and now faced the dissonance of her reliance on uncredited foundations. The ensuing notifications brought a measure of wry satisfaction, the witty indirection serving as a balm to the day's revelations while underscoring the inequities that had shaped our lives. Yet as twilight deepened outside the window with stars emerging in the velvet sky, the sudden sweep of headlights across my driveway announced an unheralded arrival, Mom's familiar Buick materializing with her figure visible through the windshield, tears tracing visible paths down her cheeks in the dashboard glow, heralding a confrontation that promised to strip away remaining veils and propel us toward the heart of the long-suppressed truths animating this unraveling family narrative. Mom's Buick easing to a halt in the driveway under the deepening twilight where street lamps flickered to life along the quiet suburban lane, casting elongated shadows that danced across the lawn like specters of unresolved histories waiting to emerge from the recesses of family lore, her figure emerging from the driver's seat with a hunched posture that spoke of exhaustion compounded by the emotional toll of days spent in self-imposed seclusion upstairs in the house that had served as the anchor for our lives since Dad's absence left it echoing with memories of laughter and arguments alike. Tears glistening on her cheeks illuminated by the porch light I had left on earlier in the evening after tucking Mia into bed with a story about resilient heroines from one of her favorite chapter books that now seemed prophetically apt given the unfolding drama. Meeting her at the door with a mix of apprehension and reluctant compassion, I guided her inside to the living room couch where the cushions sagged under her slight frame as she clutched a crumpled tissue in one hand and a worn envelope in the other. The air thick with the scent of her lavender soap mingled with the faint mustiness of old paper that hinted at artifacts pulled from hidden drawers or forgotten attics, where secrets had slumbered undisturbed until Jake's recent excavations brought them to light. Elena, my girl, I can't bear this silence any longer between us, the one that's grown from that foolish dinner remark into something that threatens to swallow the whole family whole, so please, just listen as I try to explain the mess I've made through years of choices that favored one path over another in ways I thought were protective but now see as deeply unfair. She pleaded in a voice fractured by sobs that echoed softly off the walls adorned with Mia's school drawings and framed photos of happier times like the beach outings to Lake Michigan where sibling squabbles over sandcastles foreshadowed the larger conflicts now surfacing, her eyes searching mine for the forgiveness that had eluded her in the isolation of her bedroom retreat filled with Dad's fishing magazines and half-knitted scarves abandoned mid-row. As we settled into the dim glow of the table lamp that cast warm pools of light across the carpet worn from years of pacing during late-night worries about bills and health scares, Mom unfolded her confession gradually, admitting that the words at dinner had erupted from a place of nostalgia triggered by a recent anniversary of Dad's passing, where Sophia's tales of real estate conquests evoked his own entrepreneurial spirit in starting the small auto repair shop that had sustained us through lean winters and provided the seed for the modest nest egg now entangled in legal ambiguities. Yet beneath that surface praise lay layers of guilt for leaning so heavily on Sophia's visible successes to fill the void left by widowhood while overlooking the steady, unflashy support I had provided through endless errands, financial contributions during her recoveries from surgeries, and the emotional labor of mediating family tensions that arose during holidays heavy with turkey dinners and forced merriment. The envelope she produced from her purse, its edges frayed from repeated handling and sealed with yellowed tape that suggested origins in Dad's meticulous filing system, contained a letter penned in his familiar looping script dated mere weeks before the heart attack that felled him during what should have been a routine evening walk around the block, detailing a disastrous investment he had quietly made at Sophia's urging during her early 20s when she pitched a house-flipping scheme, promising quick returns in the volatile post-recession market that instead hemorrhaged funds through unexpected repairs, market slumps, and overextended loans that Dad covered from his personal savings to shield her from the sting of failure and preserve the illusion of infallibility Mom so cherished in her children. This revelation intertwined with my own buried sacrifices, as Mom confessed through halting breaths that I had unknowingly subsidized those very risks by deferring withdrawals from the joint family account I managed during my college years to prioritize Sophia's tuition extensions after her initial semesters faltered under party distractions and inconsistent attendance. Choices she had known about but never acknowledged in the rush to celebrate Sophia's rebound into real estate certifications that painted her as the phoenix rising from familial ashes. The dilemma crystallized in that moment like frost on a winter windowpane, forcing me to confront whether to envelop Mom in the absolution she sought, thereby perpetuating the cycle of selective memory that had defined our interactions for decades, or to probe deeper into the wounds for a reckoning that might liberate us all from the distortions of favoritism, a path that observers might view as unforgiving rigidity in the face of a parent's vulnerability yet felt imperative for reclaiming the narrative of my contributions from the shadows where they had languished amid PTA bake sales, overtime shifts, and the solitary parenting decisions that shaped Mia's world without fanfare. Flashes of Dad's final days resurfaced unbidden, recollections of hospital vigils where Sophia arrived fashionably late with dramatic entrances that garnered nurses' sympathies while I coordinated schedules, meals, and paperwork in the background. Her whispers of shared burdens ringing now with the hollowness of unfulfilled promises as the letter's contents illuminated how her ambitions had siphoned resources meant for equitable distribution, leaving me to navigate community college debts and entry-level jobs that built my current stability through grit rather than inheritance. By midnight, with Mom's narrative exhausted and her head nodding against the couch arm in a doze born of cathartic release, I retreated to my bedroom upstairs where the moonlight filtered through blinds to illuminate the desk cluttered with work files and Mia's latest report card boasting straight A's earned through study sessions I supervised amid my own fatigue. Pulling out my phone to scroll through the family calendar that listed the upcoming dinner at Aunt Linda's sprawling backyard patio, complete with string lights and grilled fare designed to mend fences after recent upheavals. The event, floated weeks earlier as a neutral ground for airing grievances over potato salad and corn on the cob, presented an opportune stage for subtle escalation, prompting me to draft a group message suggesting we incorporate nostalgic toasts to Dad's legacy with shared anecdotes from his letters, strategically attaching a redacted scan of the envelope's key passage highlighting Sophia's name and the debt notations in a file labeled innocently as family history gems for the gathering, the ploy engineered to surface during the meal's communal warmth when defenses lowered amid clinking glasses and laughter, ensuring the exposure unfolded with the wit of faux reminiscence that would compel questions without my direct intervention. A revenge laced with satisfaction at envisioning Sophia's composure cracking amid the relatives' murmurs while Mom grappled with the public airing of her complicity. Morning dawned with Mom stirring awake on the couch, her eyes clearer yet shadowed by the night's admissions as she embraced me with a fierceness uncommon in our recent years. Vowing to rectify the will's imbalances through consultations with estate attorneys who could unravel the post-funeral alterations and restore equity to the distribution that had favored flash over fortitude. Her words carrying a sincerity that tugged at my resolve even as doubts lingered about the depth of her transformation after so many instances of reversion to old patterns during crises like the time I covered her car repairs post-accident, while Sophia sent generic gift cards from afar. As she departed in the Buick with promises of follow-up calls and joint visits to the lawyer's office downtown where skyscrapers loomed as symbols of the legal battles ahead, the house resumed its daytime rhythm with Mia's school preparations and my commute to the office through traffic congested by construction crews repairing potholes from the recent rains, yet the undercurrent of impending confrontation thrummed persistently, amplified by a sudden email notification pinging on my phone as I merged onto the highway. The subject line read urgent, Ramirez Family Estate Review, dispatched from an unfamiliar address tied to a law firm specializing in probate matters. its contents outlining a formal initiation of proceedings based on newly submitted evidence from Jake's attic discoveries, including affidavits contesting the will's amendments and scheduling a mandatory meeting to address potential fraud in the debt reallocations that had skewed benefits towards Sophia's ventures at the expense of broader familial shares. Heart pounding against the steering wheel as I navigated the expressway's curves with billboards advertising retirement communities and family law services that now seemed eerily prescient. The message hinted at ramifications extending to asset freezes and repayment demands that could upend Sophia's lifestyle of open house brunches and client dinners, thrusting the conflict into a realm where personal vendettas intersected with legal imperatives, leaving me to wonder amid the rush hour din whether this development stemmed from Jake's proactive outreach or a preemptive strike from Sophia herself in a bid to control the narrative before the family gathering exposed her vulnerabilities. The swelling uncertainty enveloped me like the exhaust fumes trailing semis on the road ahead, the promise of revenge now intertwined with dilemmas about loyalty's limits and the cost of truth in a family woven from threads of affection strained by secrets. Propelling the story toward a climax where revelations could either forge unlikely alliances or sever ties irreparably in the face of impending reckonings that demanded choices no longer deferrable. That lawyer's email materializing on my phone screen amid the relentless flow of morning traffic on the highway, where semis lumbered alongside sedans in a convoy of commuters bound for downtown offices and suburban escapes alike. Its formal language dissecting the intricacies of Dad's will with clinical precision that belied the personal upheavals it portended for our family structure long strained by imbalances of affection and opportunity, pulled me inexorably into the vortex of a climax, where hidden truths threatened to erupt like long-dormant geysers beneath the surface of our carefully maintained suburban facade. Each word outlining the initiation of a probate review triggered by Jake's attic revelations and corroborated by affidavits from distant relatives who had witnessed the post-funeral alterations Mom enacted in a haze of grief that favored Sophia's ambitions over the equitable distribution Dad had envisioned in his final lucid months. The document detailed how Sophia had forged Dad's signature on a critical loan extension mere weeks before his heart attack, a desperate maneuver to buoy her faltering house-flipping enterprise that had already consumed substantial portions of the family savings through unforeseen renovations and market downturns that turned potential profits into mounting liabilities. Actions Mom had retroactively endorsed by amending the will to channel the bulk of the estate towards Sophia's recovery and expansion into real estate certifications, effectively erasing my designated shares that were intended to fund further education or homeownership stability after years of my contributions to household expenses during Dad's declining health and Sophia's early missteps. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as the skyline loomed closer with its cluster of gleaming towers symbolizing the legal fortresses where such disputes would unfold, the dilemma intensifying like the building pressure in a pressure cooker where one path advocated immediate intervention to halt the proceedings and preserve some semblance of unity amid the Thanksgiving tables and birthday celebrations that had defined our bonds, while the other tempted with the allure of allowing the judicial process to excavate the full extent of the deceptions, thereby enforcing a reckoning that might redistribute not just assets, but the emotional ledger of sacrifices I had logged from teenage job earnings funneled into Sophia's sports gear to the recent deferrals of my own retirement savings to cover Mom's medical copays without fanfare or reciprocity. Choices that external observers might critique as harboring resentment too deeply rooted to forgive in the face of a parent's contrition, yet resonated with the raw authenticity of midlife assertions against lifelong diminishment. Navigating the off-ramp toward Aunt Linda's neighborhood, where manicured lawns fronted two-story colonials adorned with autumn wreaths and American flags that fluttered in the crisp breeze carrying scents of wood smoke from neighborhood fire pits, I arrived early to the planned family dinner under a sky streaked with clouds that mirrored the gathering storm of revelations set to unfold around the long picnic table on her expansive backyard patio illuminated by strings of white lights twinkling like hesitant stars against the encroaching dusk. The scene buzzed with preparatory energy as cousins arranged folding chairs and platters of grilled corn, potato salad laced with mustard and herbs, and the centerpiece roast turkey whose golden skin promised communal comfort amid the undercurrents of tension that had simmered since the original dinner slate. Jake hovering near the grill with tongs in hand while avoiding direct eye contact that might betray his role in submitting the evidentiary documents to the attorneys, and Sophia already ensconced in a corner conversing animatedly with aunts about her latest property listing, as if the shadows of debt and forgery hung no heavier than the falling leaves carpeting the grass. Mom pulled up shortly thereafter in her Buick, her face etched with a resolve tempered by the vulnerability exposed in our late-night exchange, drawing me aside into the kitchen fragrant with baking apple pie, where she clasped my hands and reiterated her remorse for the will's distortions, confessing that the favoritism stemmed not from disdain for my steadiness, but from a misguided fear that Sophia's volatility required bolstering to prevent total collapse, an explanation laced with sincerity that chipped at my defenses even as doubts persisted about the feasibility of undoing decades of patterned oversight during crises like the flood that damaged the old house when I orchestrated the insurance claims and cleanup, while Sophia vacationed oblivious in Florida. As the group assembled around the table with plates heaped and glasses raised in tentative toasts to Dad's memory that evoked his shop stories of fixing transmissions under hoods greasy with effort, Sophia seized the moment to propose a unifying sentiment about family resilience through thick and thin, her voice steady with the charisma that had charmed clients and relatives alike. Yet the phrase landed with ironic weight given the thickening web of deceptions now documented in legal filings that could thin the ties binding us if not addressed head-on. Seizing the orchestrated opportunity one had seeded through the group message with its attached scan of Dad's letter snippet, I interjected smoothly into the lull following her toast by sliding my phone across the checkered tablecloth to the center where candle flames danced in the evening chill, the screen displaying the redacted probate notice with highlighted passages on the forgeries and estate debts, accompanying the gesture with a wry observation delivered in a tone blending casual reminiscence with pointed clarity, thick like the hidden loans that propped up certain dreams and thin like the truths we've sidestepped for years. Perhaps this gathering is the perfect time to toast to the real foundations Dad laid, the ones that valued all contributions equally rather than letting some sink under the weight of others' gambles. The words hung in the air like the smoke from the grill dissipating into the night, eliciting a collective intake of breath as eyes darted to the screen and then to Sophia, whose fork slipped from her fingers to clatter against the plate, her composed veneer fracturing into a mask of pallor and disbelief, while Jake nodded gravely to confirm the affidavit's authenticity, detailing how the forged extension had not only depleted Dad's reserves, but buried a codicil praising my reliability as the family's unspoken backbone, a provision Sophia's actions had obscured to secure her larger inheritance amid the grief that clouded Mom's judgments post-funeral. Chaos rippled outward in waves of murmurs and questions from the aunts who had long lauded Sophia's ascent and cousins now exchanging glances laden with re-evaluation of past narratives, Mom burying her face in her hands as sobs escaped that carried the weight of complicity in the cover-up. Her earlier promises to rectify now tested in the public glare where relatives called out the nonsense of a success built on unacknowledged pilfering from shared resources meant for collective uplift. Twists cascaded in the ensuing tumult like dominoes toppling under their own momentum, with Sophia's defenses crumbling to reveal that her tears following the original dinner had not sprung from Mom's isolation, but from overhearing my initial group chat jab that pierced too close to her financial precarity, prompting a frantic confession to Mom that night in a bid for alliance against perceived sabotage, a manipulation that only deepened the rift by entangling Mom further in the web of silence around the forgeries and debts now laid bare under legal scrutiny. The major revelation crystallized as Jake produced printed copies from his jacket pocket, the codicil's text affirming Dad's intent to balance the will with provisions for my stability, including funds for Mia's future education drawn from the shop's sale proceeds that Sophia's schemes had preemptively eroded. exposing how her post-heart attack desperation had not only forged documents, but coerced Mom's amendments through tearful appeals that exploited widowhood's vulnerabilities, a betrayal that reframed the entire arc of favoritism from protective indulgence to calculated self-preservation at the expense of sibling equity. Emotions surged through the group in a torrent of anger directed at Sophia's selfishness that had siphoned opportunities from my path, pity for Mom's denial-fueled errors amid the loneliness of empty nester years, and a hollow triumph in my orchestrated reveal that compelled accountability without resorting to overt aggression, the witty framing of the toast ensuring the exposure resonated as narrative reclamation rather than petty vendetta, satisfying the pent-up urge for recognition while underscoring the moral ambiguities of my incremental revenges that had escalated from subtle texts to this pivotal unmasking. Alliances shifted palpably around the table as Jake aligned with me in advocating for the probate's full course to enforce repayments, Aunt Linda decrying Sophia's fabricated life. With blunt appraisals that cut through the evening air, and even distant cousins who had envied her lifestyle now offering sympathetic nods toward my overlooked endurance, the dinner's fare growing cold amid the heated exchanges that blended recriminations with tentative overtures toward mediation through the attorney's impending sessions. In the aftermath, as arguments flared and subsided into uneasy truces with plates pushed aside and lights swaying gently overhead, the family did not dissolve into irreparable fragments. Mom recommitted to contesting the will's changes with professional guidance that could restore balances long distorted, Sophia retreating into sullen apologies laced with vows to liquidate assets for restitution that hinted at a glimmer of accountability beneath her wounded pride, her departure in the SUV's taillights fading down the street carrying the weight of a pedestal toppled by truths too insistent to ignore. Driving home through the darkened suburbs where porch lights guided the way like beacons of tentative hope amid the night's revelations, Mia's incoming text about a school project deadline provided a grounding reminder of the life I had built independently of the familial entanglements now partially resolved yet lingering in ambiguities that fogged the horizon like mist over Lake Michigan at dawn. Questions persisted in the quiet of the car, echoing the unresolved chords of the evening. Had my series of clever exposures truly healed the fissures or merely widened them into chasms where trust eroded further under the strain of exposed deceptions? Would Sophia's pledges of change withstand the practicalities of debt repayment and professional fallout or revert to patterns of deflection that had sustained her for years? And for me, could Mom's professed recognition of my worth as the family's true pride translate into actions that bridge the emotional divides forged in childhood favoritism, or remain another layer of performative amends destined to fade with time? The uncertainty enveloped the journey like the cool night air seeping through the cracked window, a thought-provoking expanse that invited reflection on the costs of revenge pursued through wit and patience rather than fury. Pondering whether declaring one's value ultimately meant severing ties to the table of origins where plates of heritage were served unevenly, or if some resilient thread of blood loyalty could weave through the fractures to foster a redefined kinship unmarred by the shadows of past oversights. What path would emerge from this precipice? And at what unforeseen price to the narratives we each carried forward into the uncharted territories of midlife reckonings?